Hey there, my name is Rachael Kalaki.
I'm Annie.
And I'm Shelby. And welcome to the Magdala podcast.
We know from experience that pornography, masturbation, and other sexual addictions are not just a guy problem.
The need for women to be accompanied in their journey toward healing from addiction has gone sorely unmet, and that's why we're here.
Magdala is a space where women can find hope, healing, and freedom from sexual addiction through support, community, and accountability.
Here on the podcast, you'll find everything from testimonies to practical advice to discussions on how to live fully as a Catholic woman.
You are not alone, and wherever you are on your journey, we welcome you to this table.
All right, welcome back to the Magdala podcast. I have to say, I have been waiting to podcast with this particular person for a very long time. It's been a long time. So today I have my friend Anna Carter with me from Eden Invitation. You'll hear more about her life, her work in just a minute. But I really think Anna is the person I have wanted to podcast most with in the entire world. So welcome, Anna.
It is such a big world, so that is a huge honor. Thank you, Rachael. It is lovely to be here with you.
Maybe I'd want to podcast with like C.S. Lewis more than you, but he's not alive. And if he was, he wouldn't be on my podcast probably because he'd be too famous. But anyway, welcome, Anna. We're going to talk about sisterhood today, which I'm excited about because I think you and I are going to have some unique vantage points to bring to the conversation, but also because I've just been so blessed by my friendship and my sisterhood with you. So I think this is going to be, just a really fun, fruitful conversation. It's a Friday, so we're going to end our week just chitty-chatting, and it's going to be fun. But Anna, to kick us off, I would love for you to tell our audience, I know sometimes we have crossover between our missions, but tell us about your work with Eden Invitation, and then anything else that you want to share about yourself, which is a big, wide question.
Great. Yeah. So Eden Invitation is, first and foremost, it's really community and aspirationally formation for people that have LGBTQ plus experiences and are really looking to figure out what does it mean for me to thrive in the church. People who want to follow church teaching or at least like Catholic curious and want to know more. So really practically, we do small groups, retreats. We have an online community, just trying to provide different ways to get people connected to one another, but also, connected to some good resources about a life of discipleship, in the midst of some of those discordant experiences of sexuality and gender.
And you're coming up on 9 years, right?
I know.
It's
crazy. Insane. It's crazy.
Yeah. And I think the emphasis on community is one of the things I'm most inspired by with Eden Invitation. And one of the things I love as a supporter is just the communal aspect, which I think is going to be interesting as we talk about sisterhood, just the idea of family. But because I love this about EI, I would love maybe you to share just a little bit about that, the community being at the heart of what you're doing. That familial aspect of EI, if you could just share about that for a second, just because I love it.
Yeah, I think there's probably a crisis of belonging and loneliness throughout a lot of different demographics. Even like in the secular space, right? It's like been named as like a public health concern in the United States, and I think we see in Catholic spaces a rise in a lot of different groups that are kind of promoting community, and I think that for a number of reasons, people who are attracted to the same sex or don't really feel at home in their bodies sometimes have difficulty. There's just some different obstacles to showing up in some of those traditionally Catholic communal spaces. It doesn't mean that those are off limits. It doesn't mean that those places can't be welcoming. But there's a number of people that I think have stories of feeling isolated, right? Or feeling rejected or not knowing how to show up. And I think Eden Invitation really provides a way to say, hey, look, like we've all got something pretty big in common that is oftentimes a cause for shame, oftentimes a reason people might feel ostracized. But here you know, I mean, you mentioned Lewis earlier, right? I just think of his section in the Four Loves on Friendship, right? Like, what, you too? I thought I was the only one. And so just coming together, around that, but not just like staying there. A lot of what Eat Imitation does is actually, I mean, I've mentioned the word discipleship, but it's like, okay, like, what does it look like to talk to God about this experience? Like, what does it mean to wrestle with God's like passive and permissive will in the midst of circumstances you didn't choose and in the midst of suffering? And what does it look like to have good friendships? And who's gonna be there for you if your life doesn't fit a normal vocational trajectory? Or if it does go into a normal quote unquote, a more popular vocational trajectory, that's going to bring its own challenges. And so those are all different things that we're talking about, not just in isolation, right? It's not like, oh, go read this book and like, good luck to you. But we really try to bring people together and foster, I think, strong friendships, a sense of, sisterhood and brotherhood amongst the people who really become members, you know, of Eat an Imitation.
Yeah, and you do it successfully. You do it successfully with a lot of respect for the individual person, which is just profound to me. But yeah, let's talk about that, the sisterhood thing. Because to be honest, when I was like, I'll host the sisterhood one, and we kind of decided that planning the season, the word sisterhood sometimes just like icks me out a little bit. I think because, just you're laughing, but it's true. Because I think, as with many terms, as with many realities, we've lost the full scope of what's possible in sisterhood in modernity. To me, like, we use it a lot just in more like flowery, kind of superficial terms of like, I can think of my college years, like, you know, at that Newman Guide Catholic school, we use the term sisterhood for like every interaction from woman to woman, right? And I think, so I'd love to talk about it for a second of like, could we wrap words around maybe what we think sisterhood is, or being a sister is? And then we can talk about maybe its significance, but I'd love to wrap some terminology around what is this relationship of sisterhood, and what is it for? What's it intended for? What's the depths that it can reach to in its specificity? I don't know. And you are a good wordsmith, so I trust you to throw out something awesome. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, well, I think if we're going to use words that come out of biological familial relationship, that actually should be a starting point. I think oftentimes when we do a starting point for sisterhood, we're like, sisters are warm, sisters are, and it's like, I don't know how you relate to your sister all the time, but that, you know, like, there are ups and downs. And so I would say, like, what characterizes in the physical world, right? What characterizes sisterhood? And I think really practically, it's a bond to somebody neither of you chose with someone of, so it's a bond with somebody who's a peer or close to it, that neither one of you chose. And yet it carries with it culturally a sense of, ideally, I think in an ideal situation, it carries with it a sense of mutual respect, I think a mutual reverence, and also I think a fidelity despite differences, right? I think there's kind of an assumption that all the sisters are not going to be the same. And that leads to a lot of pain, I think, sometimes as well in families of origin, when you have these differences that are run deeply between how sisters relate to each other, or how the world perceives them differently, or how they think parents perceive them differently. And it's interesting, right? But then when we talk about being adopted into the family of God, and now we have this sisterhood spiritually as being part of God's family, I think some of those criteria, they still hold, right? What does it mean? And it gets a little funky when you're talking about all of the women in the body of Christ as like fellow sisters, because that's ages like baby to 90, you know? So that's not a perfect analog, but I think those senses of what does it mean to have a mutual reverence and a respect and a fidelity through difference, in spite of difference, alongside of difference. with people God chose for you.
Mm-hmm.
That's my first pass.
It's a great pass. It is a great pass. The word that comes to mind for me too is just responsibility. When I think of my biological sisters with whom I also enjoy a friendship in my adulthood, which I feel very blessed by that. There is a mutual responsibility. And when you think about the root words of responsibility, it's like, is it sponsa or something? Like that it's the same root word of spouse, response. Like I stand behind this relationship. I stand behind my actions towards you. I stand behind my words towards you. There's an obligation towards you or to you. And I think that's where, like, at least in Magdala's scope, we do encourage sisterhood among our members because like you're talking about, like we have something in common that isn't very comfortable or fun. And we didn't necessarily choose to be here. Like we chose to be part of Magdala, but we didn't choose, I didn't choose my specific small group. Most of our women don't choose their accountability partners. Their group leader does. And so there's this sense of responsibility that we want to instill of like, but this is still a relationship that you're being asked to stand with, to stand behind, to have a response to. And yeah, I don't know. And that's where the flowery, kind of touchy-feely sisterhood, I think, falls really flat. Because when I think of the most refining relationships I've had with women in my life, who I would call my sisters outside of my biological sisters, they're not the easiest, most touchy-feely relationships, right? Like the sisters who have been sisters to me are the ones who give the relationship weight, who call me out on my BS, who challenge me. And I think, yeah, there's something to that of this giving the relationship weight and taking responsibility for it. That comes to mind for me of how I want to wrap words around sisterhood.
Yeah, no, I would echo that, and I think that's maybe the word I was using of like fidelity or like faithfulness is rhyming perhaps with what you're saying, and it also makes me think as well of just elements actually of like Catholic social teaching, quite frankly. Because I remember when I taught it, I used to be a high school teacher, a high school morality teacher. And I loved this quote from John Paul II. I'm not, off the top of my head, I do not remember what, writing or document it's from, but I know, fail. Yeah, he just says like, nobody can claim like Cain that he is not responsible for the fate of his brother. And obviously people have autonomy and choice. And I think people could run with that statement in ways that aren't helpful. But I think what I like about it is this sense of mutual responsibility. And actually that's one of the values of Eden Invitation is mutual belonging. And then underneath it, we have like, rather than like a full definition, we actually have like postures of like, what does that mean that you do? And one of them under mutual belonging says we are all responsible for one another's good. And so there's a sense that like when I move into a communal space, when I move into a sisterhood space, yes, there's something I'm going to be receiving, but there's also something I need to be giving. And there's something I need to be safeguarding for myself and for the others here.
Yeah. I'd love to hear, just what sisterhood has looked like practically in your life and bringing in as much or as little as you want of your own story, of your own desires and how that plays in to just sisterhood in general. Like, I would just love to hear how the Lord's kind of worked in this for you and what the journey's been like. Yeah,
I think my journey with this has always been super complicated because of being attracted to women. Right. And so I think that like, there's a lot about the spirituality around, like I was actually really blessed, I think, to have an overall positive experience and a gritty experience of sisterhood when I was in college. So I went to Franciscan and I was in a household there, which is kind of like a Christian sorority. But there's also a lot of, but in distinction from that, there's like weekly commitments that are all very spiritual. And then we had small group, like accountability groups. And my household also happened to have, so the household I was in was, this is not how you would say this properly in Latin, but this is what we called it. Cari Domini.
Yeah.
Basically
That's not
like
the feminist for Christ one.
dear
right?
ones. No, but it's like dear ones or like beloved of the
Yeah.
Lord, right?
Yeah.
And I would joke that I thought that our shared charism was all these women who didn't like believe they were loved. And that's why they were in this household. That was my joke. So if any people from Cari Domini are listening to this, you know it's true. Okay. So, but what that meant was it drew like a lot of like very different women. Like it felt like a pretty diverse household insofar as like background or sins people struggled with or past they had before coming to Franciscan, family dynamics, relational, what their dating dynamics had been. Like it was all very different. And so I think actually from a pretty young age in my Christian life, 18, 19, early 20s, there was definitely a sense of like, oh, you show up for people who are different than you and that you can't really relate to, but you're part of it. You're part of sisterhood and here you are and you're like living in this grit and you have to show up to these things 4 times a week. There was a lot of commitments. And so that was actually probably my first like immersive experience of Christian sisterhood that was actually like very immersive and like not super normal for a lot of people that might go to other schools. And so I'm actually really grateful for a lot of that because I think, again, there was this sense of like, you just show up. And there was also like a covenant that we signed. There was like a commitment, so it was kind of like, in addition to the idea of like, we're all united by baptism, we're actually like also united by these like common values and common commitments. And because of that, that's the unifying principle operating here. It's not like aspects of personality or interests or hobbies or things that are very good and valuable for binding friend groups together. But I think it enabled, again, a more like diverse group of backgrounds to come together because the unifying principle was something that was more spiritual. And so, And so I think for me though, I obviously would have the chronic concern throughout my life of eventually like falling in love with one of friends or whomever, you know what I mean? And so there was like, well, there we go again.
Darn it.
That, so I think for me, my journey with Christian sisterhood in that way or Christian female friendship has also been a looking at like, okay, what am I looking for here? Like, what do I feel like I need? What am I like not getting? What should I be bringing to the Lord? But also not being afraid of it. Sorry, maybe I'm rambling now, but that's a follow-up question is like, I do think it could be easy for people that are attracted to the same sex to sometimes feel suspicious of themselves in Christian communal settings that are single gender, as many of them are. And I definitely have gone through that. But I think that's just something else that I think I wrestled with as well in my
the
Christian sister journey.
The Christian sister journey. Coming to EWTN. No, I think the fear the fear aspect or like afraid of themselves, distrusting of themselves makes perfect sense. I think you've also spoken to this before. Maybe it was in our Seek Talk that you talked about the specific experience of same-sex desires kind of also casting you out of like, oh, I can't even have friendship with the same sex then. So am I just supposed to be friends with the opposite sex? Like there's that lie that like to be in friendship is almost like a near occasion of sin. And I've heard that perspective before, and I find it so alarming. But I think if you had experience of that, what was navigating that like? Of like, I need this. It seems like being at Franciscan was a great, like, I don't know, like you were cast into the pool of women anyway. It's like, that's the spirit of the thing. Yeah. But.
Yeah, I think for me, I've been fortunate I don't think I've ever felt like, oh, I can't have any female friends at all. Like, and I do know there are some people that would wrestle with that. I don't think that's as much what it was for me. I think for me, it was more like, how close can you get? And like, how close is too close? Like a different version of how far is too far. Like, how close is too close? And then I think as well, the other thing that I kind of have had different opinions on over the years, but I think the other thing I was also really desperate for, but also terrified of, was like a best friend. And I think there were some ways when I was younger, probably in like middle school and high school, that there was like some little baby idolatry around that, you know, like,
Sure.
I don't know if you ever think of this about like your idolatry, but you're like, there's like big idols, but then I also feel like I think of like pagan ancestor shrines where there's like, oh, I just have this little guy, just this little idol here in my closet.
Yeah.
And so I feel like I've had plenty of those throughout my life. And one of them, I think, at a young age was a best friend, right?
Yeah.
Which got really tangled up, I think, in feelings of attraction. And so then I think as I got older, I tried to like remedy that. Like my like suspicion reaction, my protection reaction was like, okay, I can't have a best friend. So I probably should have 20. And all of those 20 women should know like all of the deep things about my life. And so then I became like this like oversharer with like and I had like a lot of people. I mean, in some ways there was like positives to that, right? It's like, I know a lot of good people because of that, but and did have good friendships. But I think then as I've aged, I'm like finding more of the middle of that, where you're like, okay, at the end of the day, you can probably only have on one hand, you know, like who are those people who, as my mentor would say, that you can like cry and like scream and sob on the bathroom floor with? Like, you're probably not going to have more than 2 or 3 of them. And if you even have one of those people, you are
Blessed.
Incredibly, but you just can't have that level of intimacy with too many people. It just doesn't work, and you don't have time. No one has time and energy for that. And so recognizing that like deep closeness, but then also that there are these layers, right? There's like layers of intimacy. There's layers of relational vulnerability in the midst of that. And I think that can all coexist underneath this sister concept. I guess maybe that's slightly different. Maybe we're defining things slightly differently, but I think all that can nest under the concept of sister. It's not like Christian sisters in the spiritual sense all have to be the sob on the bathroom floor people. Like just like we were all baptized, so I guess that means
therefore
this is an expectation for everybody. Like I think within sisterhood, there's still levels of friendship.
I totally agree.
That coexist.
And I think when you're talking about becoming oversharing or all of that kind of stuff, I went through a season of that in college too. I think in part because, I mean, Ave's environment is somewhat similar to Franciscan, a little bit smaller, but like, I think the small Catholic school environment's a super unique college experience. In that you kind of, at least on my end, I felt expected to be friends with a lot of people because we are in that environment. And I felt very disseminated. Like my friendship felt very like spread thin for a couple of years until I kind of started realizing what you're talking about of like there's going to be levels, and I'm trying to put too many people on one level. But I'm a person with limitations, and my sisterhood has, or at least the depths of it has limitations. And another thing I'm thinking as you're talking too is like that we all have other stuff we're bringing into these spiritually familial relationships. Like when I think of the things that I've had to take into account in relating to women, it still is just a different angle on the same question of like, what am I trying to get out of this? What am I not getting? What am I bringing to the table here that isn't about the person's good or my own? And I think for me, like, I know comparison has been a huge obstacle to my relationships with sisters, whether biological or not, you know, if my actual sisters are listening to this, they're like, hey, but that was kind of an interesting microcosm, was like, I grew up comparing myself to my sisters. And there are many ways I feel like they are more similar to each other than they are to me. And it's funny when I've talked to them about it, they both feel that way. Like, cause there's 3 sisters in our family. They both feel that way about the other 2. Like there's kind of this triangle of comparison.
Oh, fascinating.
Yeah. And I think that's, it's something we've all tried to overcome to the best of our ability. But I noticed that happening in my friendships outside of my sisters too. It's just comparison comes in as, classic, like the thief of joy and the thief of connection.
Yeah.
If I'm trying to relate to a sister in Christ from the standpoint of comparison, it's not going to go very well. It's not going to go very far. And I think for me, that comparison isn't in needing to be better or prettier or anything. It's come from a place of being raised in an environment where I felt like a lot of my personality and my gifts were quote unquote more masculine. And so relating to women felt really unique to me of like, do I fit here? Like, am I fitting in? And that's created a really interesting dynamic for me to navigate over the years. And there's been a lot of, I'll say healing in that, or like clarity in that of what the Lord was actually speaking in my life and my personality. But I think I'm just thinking of how we all bring something to the table that makes our relationships with other women challenging and refining at the same time.
Well, it's interesting, Rachel. It's so funny when you said like you wanted me to come on and talk about sisterhood, because it's right around the time I don't know when this is releasing, but just last weekend, I gave a talk at the Walking with Purpose Flourish conference, and the talk I gave was like the wounds of sisterhood. And so one of the things that I talked about, I just mentioned how I think that when we're in the Christian life and we're trying to follow God, and there's so much around identity. So I think a lot of us who have like been around in Christian spaces for a little while have done like daughter work, right? We're like, what was it like to, because it's like, my earthly father is not my heavenly father. And like, I must separate those two in order to have a good relationship with God the Father, right? So a lot of us have done that work, but I wonder how many of us have done like sister work.
Woof, yeah.
And like what I meant by that in the talk was like how, again, like I think reckoning with our family of origin issues on a parental level helps with like the vertical dynamics of our relationship with God, right? But I was thinking more about like, what about how much time do we give to like our sibling dynamics? Because I wonder if there's ways that actually shows up in like the horizontal dynamics of our relationship, like with the church. Right? Like, how do I show up in spaces that are supposed to be Christian sisterhood spaces? Like, how do I show up in the body of Christ with other men and other women when, how much, and I'm sure that's to varying degrees for all of us what that influence is. But like, I also in that talk, like listed off like all of these different areas, right? Of like that we see in scripture. I mean, comparison is a huge one. We said with like Leah and Rachel and Martha and Mary. And also maybe someone's listening to this who like didn't have any siblings. And so like, where are you learning? So the absence of sisterhood is going to be informing things. And so anyway, I just find that really interesting. It's like, what does it look like? Like what are we carrying? Positive and negative, quite frankly. I think we're all carrying both of those things from our from our families into the ways that we relate.
That's really profound, because I think too, as you're talking, like the thought of how that translates for me to my relationship with the church is in a lot of female-only spaces, the question remains of, I'm like, do I fit this? Do I fit? Do I fit here? I don't look like everybody else. I don't feel like everybody else. I don't talk like everybody else, which is, true in much smaller respects than I actually feel in the moment, right? Mm-hmm. But yeah, this idea of like not fitting, that has shown up in a lot of, I'll say, women's spaces in the church. And I think as now the head of a women's space, that's been a really interesting thing to continually pray through is like, what's true in that of, okay, maybe we have collapsed femininity into more caricatures than anything in a lot of ministry spaces. I do think that's happened. And then also, what's the truth in those spaces that I can be inspired by and I can relate to? And then how can I create, hopefully, an organization that holds the deepest truths about women and lets women be free in their diversity. And we talk about that in our branding. We talk about that in our copy. Like that kind of idea comes into play a lot of like, are we falling into a caricature here, or are we being more expansive than that? But I'm curious how it's translated for you into the horizontal relationship, and if you have any insight on that. After that amazing point that I'm going to pray about for weeks. Okay, go ahead.
I think for me, it's actually, I think, come back also to like identity. I think for me, without getting into too much detail, like I think the sibling story in scripture that I have resonated with a lot, and that I did include in the talk actually, is actually like the prodigal son, like the older brother and the younger brother. And I am the oldest child in my family. But I think those dynamics can show up regardless of birth order. But I am the oldest. And I think there are a lot of ways when I was younger that there was, and still to this day, like really identified with, kind of being the one who stayed home, did the things I was taught by my parents, and watched other siblings deal with other stuff and make other choices, and feeling a little bit self-righteous, a lot of it self-righteous, and judgmental, and but trying, but like not knowing how to try, and I know that there were ways I carried that into other spaces, and I feel like, even though I wanted to be involved in ministry, I feel like it was interesting because I feel like I was always like somebody who liked to reach out to the people on the edges of the room, and the people that maybe the rest of my net team, for example, I also serve with net, would have like found to be, they don't seem like the safe one to talk to. They don't seem like the easy one to talk to. I mean, I wasn't the only one doing that, but I think that's what I resonated with. But those were all people who were like young, but I realized that when it came to peer dynamics, I did not, for a long time, I did not have a lot of patience for the way I would describe it now, looking back, is like people who I thought should know better. When you're like, because I think when you're growing up, you're like, that's not how mom and dad like raised us, or like whatever it is, you know what I mean? You just like have opinions about that. And I didn't fully understand the impacts of mental health on people. I don't think nobody was talking about that in the 90s, early 2000s, at least not in most suburban homes. Right. And so I didn't have a lot of knowledge about that at the time. But I just kind of felt like people should know better. And if you should know better, like, I don't want to hang out with you. Like, I just like didn't have tolerance for that and didn't know how. And I think on a deeper level, I didn't know how to accept the prodigal parts inside of me. And so I think for me, the journey forward was twofold. One of like, what does it look like to welcome home the prodigal parts inside of me, and to name that they exist, and to like, just to recognize that they exist at all, rather than like keeping them tucked away in like a distant land mentally. And what did it mean to like accept people I would consider prodigals who may not be, I don't know, who might have judged that, who can really, but people that weren't living the way that I was, or weren't living the way I was trying to live. What did it mean to like kind of accept them on their terms, and like to go to the top of the hill, and be like, hey, let's spend time together and let's engage and find common ground where we are. And I don't think I could do the ministry I'm doing now if I hadn't done both of those things in my own life.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Actually.
Does that make sense?
It's making sense. And it's reminding me of Romano Guardini's writings on the virtue of acceptance. I don't know if you've ever read his Learning the Virtues. So good. But he has a whole chapter on the virtue of acceptance, and he talks about first how like our acceptance of other people, our acceptance of the cross, so much comes down to acceptance, right? To a receptivity of God's will and providence, however it takes shape. But he says that like kind of the primordial acceptance before all of that is I must first accept that I exist. And I did not choose to exist, right? And so I'm thinking of like there's even a sort of sisterhood in that process that you extended to yourself of like I'm going to have this fidelity to myself. I'm going to have this responsibility. I didn't choose to exist. I didn't choose to be this person per se, but I am showing up in the world this way. And so it's interesting to me that like that's one of the pieces that I feel like in this conversation gets pricked by sisterhood, like relationships with other women, is where do I need to accept my own existence as a woman in the world? And I think relationships, like mother relationships, because we talked about mother, spouse, and daughter on the other episode, like all the relational identities. I think sisterhood pricks that more than any of the others, is like nobody points out, or no other relationship points out the discrepancies of your own existence as a woman in the world, like your relationships with other women. And I know that's been a factor for me, but yeah, like, I mean, I've talked about the not fitting feeling, and it's like a lot of my, it's funny, as you were talking, I was like, yeah, I did the exact same thing of like, you should know better, or kind of this a judgment of where other people don't fit. It's like, well, you don't fit because X, Y, Z, or and it's just my own lack of acceptance of myself showing up in my lack of acceptance of others. But that's a more meta thought that came to mind after you talked.
Well, and I think I do want to like touch on that existence piece and maybe try to make a bridge to another thought. We'll see.
The Magdala podcast is sponsored by the Catholic Theology Show, presented by Ave Maria University. The Catholic Theology Show covers themes such as the value of a Catholic higher education, religious liberty, how to pray, the philosophies of St. Thomas Aquinas, and more. Stream episodes on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and learn more by visiting the link below.
You know, I'm noticing too that even in the context of this podcast, we're talking about sister, and I feel like there's an emphasis on relationships with other women. But a sister
as brothers
isn't who someone else is, it's who I am in relation. I mean, it's who all of us are in relation to another. And so there could be people on this listening to this podcast who had all brothers.
Yeah.
Growing up. And I do want to touch on that because I do feel like it's an area where Christian community could grow, because I do feel like men, I think the ways that some of our systems are set up, it's almost like men cease to be brothers once everyone starts getting married.
Yes, I was going to say, I think you have a lot more freedom in this area than I do because of that stricture. So
yeah, and I think because I do feel I see it. Like I see that. I think dear listeners, so I'm single, right? And so like, and I'm also very publicly known to be someone predominantly attracted to other women.
What?
And so I don't know if like guys feel safer with me. They're like, oh, nothing's gonna, no. Because I think there could be this culture, right? Of like, well, once people are married, we say like, oh, women need their friends and men need their friends. But it's almost like the only opposite sex relationship you need is your spouse. And I would be interested in a married woman's opinion on this, because I'm sitting over here being like, I don't know if that's true. And I feel like men become either like other people's spouses or they're priests. And then now you're in like this pseudo fatherly dynamic.
Yeah.
Regardless of age, even if you knew them all through seminary, they're still a priest. Like they're not, your brother exactly in the way they always have been. They have been changed with an indelible mark. There's something different now.
Yeah.
And so, but I feel really blessed to, Eat the Invitation is co-ed, for those of you listening. There are men involved. And I have a lot of male friends. I would actually say my socializing, at least here locally, is a lot of men, actually.
Yeah.
I think there's a real gift, and I'm blessed. My family of origin, I have a younger brother, and I get along great. Like in adulthood, we all get along really well. But I think, I think I'm just grateful for the warmth that I experience from my own brother and from my sister. But we're talking about men, and and I think the men in my life who do. They just show up in different ways than my female friends do. Yeah, and I'm just grateful. And I think for me, just to be super stereotypical, clearly we love talking about ideas, Rachel. We do this all the time. I love talking about ideas, and I actually really enjoy talking about people's hobbies and interests. And I just feel like men tend towards that more naturally in conversation. Absolutely. And I find myself, even at parties that are filled with married couples, I say hi to my female friends, and then I'm like, wait, but the guys are talking about whiskey, or but the guys are talking about Russian novels.
Yeah.
And I want to go to there. I'm glad that your kid is potty training well, but
oh gosh,
I don't know how long I'm going to stand here and listen to that. So maybe that's not me being very receptive and sisterly, but I do think there's a beauty and something really lovely about friendships with men. And I wonder if there's ways that we could, maybe not on this podcast, solve all the world's problems in this episode, but I just wonder if that's a way we could grow as a church. And I wonder if that's an antidote in some ways to the fierce competition that we can see and the weird back and forth about feminism and persecution of men. There's this baked competition that I do think leaks into church spaces sometimes. And I wonder if one of the antidotes to that isn't just a more perfect articulation about what it means to be man and what it means to be woman, though I think that's a piece of it. But I also wonder if some of it is just being in fraternal relationship with real people.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know.
No, I think you're spot on. I think, from my perspective, being married, I think the thing that I've always held, or my husband and I have held, is it is important for us to have friendships with the opposite sex still. The contingency is that our spouse is a part of that. So I'm not really friends with men who are not also friends with my husband. And I would say probably better friends with him than I in certain respects. But I can think of one. This was really lovely. I can think of one guy friend here, and my husband and I have both been close with him for going on 6 years, 5, 6 years, 7 years, a long time. And he's one of my husband's dearest friends, was in our wedding, and he's a dear friend of mine too. And he and I even ended up doing work together when I was working for the diocese, and so we had some kind of projects or pursuits or whatever. And on our wedding day, he wrote us this amazing letter, and he addressed some of it to my husband and some of it to me. And when he addressed it to me, the first thing he told me was, he was like, "You are an incredibly beautiful bride." And just the freedom with which he spoke to me, and my husband sitting there, we're reading this letter together, and neither of us were weirded out. And it's because it's a lived relationship with this particular person, and I'm dear friends with his wife as well. So there's I think there's just a reciprocity that when you're married matters.
Right.
But I think within that of you and I have joked before about how, I would much rather, more often than not, be part of whiskey cigar chat than potty training chat, though I am potty training, and occasionally I do want to chat about it because it's hard. But I think, the realm of ideas or more abstract thinking, men engage in that in groups more readily, I think. But I'm also thinking of I think my work has demanded a certain refining of sisterhood in my posture towards men, because Magdala's topic is, in a realm that prior to us was largely inhabited by men and like spoken about by men, to men, for men, whatever. And so a lot of getting this work off the ground and seeing it sustained has been me learning to receive the brotherhood of men in my work and in my mission, to find a common mission. Like I'm thinking of our team. Like I recently organized like a quarterly call between some different nonprofit leaders in the sexual brokenness addiction world. It's all men, right? And then my staff and I, right? Like we're on there, like the three of us, we're like, hey, and it was such a beautiful call. Like there's just so much support and wisdom. Some of our most engaged supporters, some of the wisest voices in my life since starting this work have been men. And so I think when you bring up like so many great points, and I'm glad we're talking about this towards the tail end here, but yeah, when we view relationships with men, at least from my vantage point as someone who's straight, when there's like the potential for the erotic all the time, it closes you off entirely to that fraternal relationship. And I think there's like, at least at Ave, I've written about this, of like how damaging this was at the time. I mean, I grew up in like purity culture, emotional chastity world, right? And there's some truths there, but I think it did a lot of damage. And I think the Ave's posture was, we had a talk once a year called "Can Men and Women Be Friends?" Like once a year, like some philosophy professor, something or other, they would once a year hit this topic, and it would ignite the debate again. And it was just funny because it was always like, okay, but we're sitting here debating about it at the pub together over beer because you know why? We're friends. That's why. A bunch of men and women together here debating it again because we're friends. But anyway, I think when we treat friendship as the precursor to eros, we do such an injustice to friendship. Like, I think that's like one of the biggest problems of like, when you're like, oh, if men and women are friends, it'll automatically turn into erotic love, where it's like, instead of recognizing there is an opportunity for some there, but it's like there's, I never liked that linkage, because I think it makes you think, at least even now as a married woman, it makes you, if you believe that, then in the presence of every man, you're like endangered somehow and can't extend sisterhood.
Well, and I feel like
you're thinking.
I'm laughing over here because everything you're saying, I'm like, and where would I be?
Exactly.
Like, do you know what I'm saying? Like, I do feel like there's something here where it's like, I think being someone who's had to reckon a lot in life with like the friendship eros dynamic that you're talking about, right? Yeah. And it's like, actually, that's been like my whole freaking life has been like tools for figuring out how to navigate that. And I also think maybe everybody needs to hear this. Like, not everyone is your type. Like, can we just say that? Like, I feel like sometimes
I love it when you share this because I think it's so funny.
I feel like we don't like, I mean, let's be honest. Like, I have been attracted to men. It's not as frequent. They are very, very rarely shorter than 6 feet tall. I am 5'11". So maybe I'm also, I joked in a talk once, maybe I'm an altosexual or something. You have to be tall for me to be physically attracted to you. So it's like, I'm sorry, even if I was straight, totally. It's like married men under 6 feet tall, don't you worry about me. I don't know what your type is, so maybe we all should still be prudent, but But I feel like there's something there, right? Because I do feel like there's something about, if we generalize too much about like, because man, because woman, then this. Well, one, we're leaving out these minority experiences that I'm talking about, but also it just does not feel very personalist.
Right.
To recognize, and I get that there are people that are like aroused by a lot of different people, and that is something you should 100% know about yourself, and you should 100% figure out strategies that work for you. Right. So you can be in community and you can do it like prudently and with virtue, like not trying to downplay that reality. But I also think there's truth to the point that like, like for me, like just because someone's a woman doesn't mean I'm actually going to be attracted to them. Just because someone's a man doesn't mean I'm actually going to be attracted to them. And so I wonder if sometimes we do have this overgeneralization of that leap between a bond, like jumping into the potential for like arousal and temptation. And I wonder if that's kind of, I don't know if that posture is like entirely in accord with like our teachings around the unique nature of the human person. That doesn't feel like a very dignified way to look at the person either.
I don't think it's dignified. I think it insinuates that we're all enslaved to passions. You know, like I think that is the insinuation, which is a possibility. That is a possibility as a human being, is to be enslaved to your passions.
And that could do a lot of damage, right? I don't think either one of us are denying that if people are listening to this and feeling grumpy about this conversation.
But I think when we act like that's the baseline, that's the norm. Like the can men and women be friends? It's like, well, in virtue, yes, absolutely. That should be the answer. That was never the answer, I think. If I remember. Actually, no. Dr. Janice Breidenbach would say that. Thank you. Shout out Dr. Janice Breidenbach. But yeah, just like the virtue makes this possible. Or the journey to virtue. None of us have achieved it, yada yada. But I'm thinking too, I feel like this is particularly relevant for our community too, because I've also encountered the assumption, differently than you obviously, but like that because I'm public, the thing I'm public about is having used pornography, right? People think that I just must lust after men all the time. I'm just the most man-loving person. Yeah, it's so funny. But I'm just like, not really. Like, that's not, I think we were kind of catechized, or we were in an era of being catechized about pornography, and like why it was wrong is because it made you objectify everyone. Or objectify, like
right, that was like the fruit. That was the bad fruit.
Right,
which,
that's the bad fruit.
Yeah.
That does occur. Or dehumanizes people or whatever. But I would say that what helped that, like in my own recovery too, like as you bring up being a sister to brothers, was like a really big jump start for me was right at the beginning of my recovery. I went through a breakup. And this person was just going through a lot at the time. And so like he asked to remain friends, which a ton of people are like, you can't be friends with an ex, yada yada. And it's like, well, I was for several years until it was, you know, like not appropriate anymore or whatever. But part of it was like learning to be his sister, learning and truly like by the end, seeing that relationship transformed into one where I considered him a brother, and like looking back on the relationship now, that's how I would define it. He was a dear friend and a brother, not an ex. Like I kind of forget that we dated, to be honest, but there was a transformation of sight in leaning into sisterhood that was really important. And I do think should be encouraged, like in the women in our community, whether towards women or men, like this, because I think sisterhood, it doesn't say like eros isn't a part of your life or desires aren't a part of your life, whatever, passions, yada yada yada. It doesn't say that's not a part of your life, but sisterhood again is about that responsibility of like, how can I best steward you? And sometimes that means holding the desires that I have, or suspending them, or setting them aside for your good. And I think that's where, at least in the married vocation, that's what I'm asked to do towards all men, right? Is
right.
Like, if action happens to come up, I'm supposed to steward that well, of like, well, this isn't for your good or for my good or my husband's good. So I'm going to set aside any desire that arises, big or small, for the sake of someone's good. And yeah, I'm thinking about that. I know I'm saying this in a very jumbled way, but how even like, because sisterhood means responsibility and fidelity, it means that we can carry those like complicated things. Like that's the obligation, is not to never have complicated things coming into play in the relationship, but rather being able to carry them.
And I think to be open to some just like healing, or again, like new ways of seeing that come out of that. Like, I think for me, I'll just speak briefly. I think in my own life, like I think for a number of years, I didn't really know how to be, men kind of intimidated me. I didn't really know how to be friends with men. I wasn't really interested in being friends with men for other reasons. But at the same time, I was also holding in my heart, because I was a youth group kid. And then again at And Newman Guide School. I sort of had this thought that like eventually the right tall man will come along, and then that is the person who will become the new best, like the best friend idol, like transfers to this man who will then become my husband. And I was sort of like waiting for like the right friend man to come along who then I would fall in love with. And I think what was interesting, and then I also thought that when that happened, I wouldn't be attracted to women anymore, or I wouldn't be as attracted to women anymore, because this man would just be so fantastic. He would just like subsume all my desire, I guess. I don't know. We think strange things when we're 19. But I think something for me was after graduation from college, I served with Ministries, and for that, they like put you on these teams of men and women, and they use a lot of brother-sister language. And I was on a traveling team, so I'm literally like road tripping around the country doing retreats in such close proximity. Like literally there's 12 people in a 12-passenger van. Like that is really close proximity to other men and women. And that I think was such a beautiful experience for me, to recognize, like to actually develop deep friendships with men that were very fraternal. And I think what it did for me, I don't think it like made me attracted to women less. But I think it just like opened my eyes to like men's dignity and like the possibility of deep relationship and friendship there that wasn't about me getting something from them. It wasn't about me like getting one of them as a spouse. And I wonder if sometimes we treat young adult events that way. Like we just see the opposite sex as like, oh, this could be my spouse, right? Like, which is so utilitarian. And I don't know. So I would say that definitely like opened up a new way of seeing, I think for me, men in my life as well. Just again, by having that like brother-sister lens. And it's that has, I think, borne a lot of good fruit in my life. Since, in friendship.
For real. We're coming up on the hour, so I should probably wind us down, because usually our episodes are like 30 to 40 minutes, but not today. I knew not to give a time limit to us. That was not going to happen. Whatever time limit we gave was not going to happen. So, I mean, we've said a lot of things. I'd love to just kind of close with, Anna, like any thoughts that you have for the women in Magdala specifically. Yeah, what transformation or healing, especially as it pertains to recovery from sexual brokenness, all this kind of stuff. What particular healing or transformation do you think sisterhood might be offering to our women that you would encourage them to lean into or take up?
I think the first thing I want to speak to is to the women that watch female porn.
Yeah.
And I think just to say that, like, just because in like dark moments, in needy moments, in lonely moments, you've watched other women in that way, it doesn't mean you're like trapped in some cycle of objectication.
I meant to say that earlier. I was talking about the...
Yeah. And I would think the same thing for women with men. I think I think what my heart is especially in that place, because it's like you're trying to seek recovery in an all-female space. And then that is also what you've been watching. And so, or maybe still are and are, working through that. And so I just want to say, like, to just have hope, especially I think in not going through this alone. Like it's better, because going through this and trying to like heal in these spaces is going to be difficult no matter what. And there's going to be unique difficulties if you're in an all-female space, but I think it's worth it to experience. I think some of that, just like healing and affirmation, and I think being supported by women in the midst of that. I believe that could also be part of the healing journey for you.
Beautifully said. Love it. I think what I'm thinking of is the lens that our groups can give, specifically like accountability, but just that I think this sisterhood in our groups and what it offers is that the way you see other women's journeys play out, the way you want to speak to them, the way you receive their stories, it teaches you how to receive your own and how to speak to yourself in the midst of recovery. And I think that's where sisterhood can be particularly powerful, is like in receiving it from other women and giving it to other women, you ultimately, hopefully, come home more deeply to yourself. And so I think that's what I would encourage our listeners to lean into, is how can you, viewing other women and maybe the men in your life too, as a sister, how can it help you be more of a sister to yourself, and come home deeply to yourself? So, yep, we could talk for several more hours, but thanks for being here, Lena. It's so good to see you. As
Well
always.
said. Good stuff, Rachel. Always a joy to hang out with other people listening to us.
I mean, just the best. Our favorite thing in the world. To be continued, and we will catch you next week on the Magdala podcast.
Thanks for listening. Check out more podcast episodes, blog posts, and how to get involved with Magdala by visiting our website, magdalaministries.org. Your love is meant to change the world. We hope to see you soon.